um, a dear friend, sister, woman I've known for, I think, around 13 years or so, Laura Pirie, who is in New Haven, Connecticut. Laura is, to me, she is a brilliant, generous, compassionate, intuitive, gracious, creative artist, who is an architect of structures as well as an architect of life. I love that phrase, a life architect, because I feel you that way. And this whole series, as we've been evolving, it has really been, we've been having this conversation around post-COVID, but really it's not post-COVID, it's the evolution and the opportunity for a new world, of what we're creating. This experience, I think, is just so profound, and I don't want to go off on all of that in terms of my point of view about it, but it really is giving us a huge opportunity. And we would like to hear your thoughts and considerations and vision about this time of possibility and opportunity. What you see as in this experience, and the tools that you can offer to help usher in this new earth, this new world, with awareness and grace and integrity. And from your own experience, we're just so excited to engage in this conversation with you. So I will hand it to you.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for your generous introduction. Truly, you are my sister as well. And thanks for thinking of me to have this kind of creative conversation, because however many times we can share ideas and share perspectives and kind of put out there the potential of this time, I think the better we'll be able to move through it to a place that will help us all do what we do better and give in a way to the whole that we haven't been able to before. Because really what this is doing is that, in addition to creating a lot of real challenge for a lot of people. And so first I want to say this time deserves a lot of sympathy and empathy for people who are really struggling. And I think that undermines or underlies all of the tools that we'll be talking about probably today. Is it's to be compassionate about the circumstance, but also in that compassion find a way forward in that way where we can take the opportunity and turn it around and see it from a new point of view. And how can we create a new and better normal, right? Because what's being revealed right now, right, is all of this inequity. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So like all of this inequity, and for all of us who are dedicated to being in service, how do we take the toolkits that we have? You do it through food, I do it through the built environment. We have lots of friends who operate with different toolkits. How can we bring all these toolkits together?
Exactly.
And help us all kind of from the ground up create more equity, more consciousness around equity and balance and caring. Because what this reveals is where we're not seeing ourselves as a system, I think. All the parts of our culture where we don't see ourselves as a system are getting laid bare.
Yeah, I think it also reveals, it has to start here. It has to start inside, and how that we feel inequity inside of ourselves as well. It's really reflected in everything that is happening. So yeah.
And it's one of those things, what a phrase that keeps coming to my mind is, we're always striving to for happiness, for balance, for whatever brings us joy in the light in our lives, right? But I've been thinking lately that maybe our lives are as much about being useful as it is being happy, because if we're useful and we're in service and we're giving, then we automatically receive. So I've been shifting. The first shift that I've been making is really finding out where I can really be useful, and not in a very broad blanket term, but in a very focused and strategic way. Like, where can I be useful? Where can my particular skill sets be of use?
Mm-hmm.
Not only in terms of what we do, but even in everyday interactions. How can I be useful? And I love that turn of mindset of being useful, because it automatically brings my awareness to the front,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it turns my questioning and my look outward, and inward at the same time, right? So I'm toggling between those two things. So how can we use our creativity to be useful, to be helpful, to kind of bring about this change, to kind of bring light to this inequity? And then, we have lots of forks in the road that are coming up. How are we going to choose? Are we going to go this way, or are we going to go this way? Is it always a zero sum? But we have some chance to kind of re-choose.
Yes.
Where maybe choices in the past haven't served us all so well. So I'm really interested right now in this choice point. Like,
yes.
What are we bringing to the choice point?
Yes. Up leveling that, right? So
yeah.
we're having that opportunity to reconfigure, and from that place, choose anew. How do we want to create our environment? How do we want to create anything? Anything that's how we communicate with our, with our loved ones, or I think that's where I see the opportunity. I see that choice is just right here and ready. And what do we want to do? What do we want to do?
And in fact, that's the point of power, right? In this moment is like what we choose, where we choose to put our attention, where we choose to put our effort, where we choose to put our usefulness. That choice is the moment. And another lesson, besides revealing the inequities and the imbalances that I think this is bringing, is none of us can think out more than a few months right now, even a few days. And I'm on the phone, on the meeting every day with my staff, and everybody can only think out 2 hours because they're all homeschooling their children and taking care of their households and trying to do their creative work in the world at the same time. So we've really been forced to narrow down how much we can project out into the future back to this moment. And again, that returns us to choices right now. And that kind of intentionality is super powerful. Like, when we're forced to focus on every choice right now, and it just is like one foot in front of the other, it's those strategic, foot, step that is moving us forward.
And of course, it has to come from what's inside. So, to me, that's where, when I was considering really looking at that up leveling of integrity, the integrity of even what you say yes to and what you say no to, what feels like it is right here versus what you should be doing from a judgment. And those choices, I think we're really being asked to make that choice from a much deeper place in our heart. And, even if it leaves us feeling vulnerable, and because we are in unknown, that's where we are. So,
That's the opportunity we all have.
Yes.
And I think the forced kind of slowing down and not being able to project out too far, to go too far out of the present moment, is a real tool. It's a real great aid in helping this, right? Because you can't think about all those things that are going to come. You can still keep your intentions set in a general direction, but the day-to-day is just right in front of us. And it's so interesting because that kind of intentionality and creation has been around, for example, in the built environment for eons, for centuries. And in fact, and I don't know if you think about this very much, but this is something I always think about is, we think of the built environment or the places where we do things or where we go or how we experience the things that we create to help ourselves live in our bodies in this place can be imbued with that level of intentionality too. So our homes, our offices, our parks, our communities, our cities aren't just passive things that we make that help keep the rain off of our head and keep us warm in the winter, but they actually can be imbued with that amount of intentionality and focused purpose, exactly, as our projects. So it's so interesting because sometimes people think of the built environment as just this passive thing. Beautiful, right? There's lots of beautiful things that get built in the environment, but they're things to look at. But what if we imagined the places that we make as living, breathing things as well? Living, breathing, responding environments that help us do what we do better.
Yeah, that support us every day, that make us feel good instead of drain us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the kind of point of view that I love to look at built environments about. And as I mentioned, this has been going on for centuries and centuries. And can I tell you about a couple of places that are made this way?
I want you to say, could you please elaborate on that?
I'll tell you some stories.
Okay, love stories.
Okay. Two of my favorite places that I know were built with intentionality. And we can talk about lots of, like in our culture, we tend to think of European precedents. We're very Eurocentric, just kind of modern America. But I want to talk about the ancient Americas, because there were lots of cultures that came before us in the Americas, North and South, that really understood the connection between their intentions as a culture and how they made their places. Okay? And the making of their places supported their dreams, their intentions, what they aspired to. So the first one I want to tell you about is Monte Alban, which is a governing center, ancient governing center that was built in about 3000 BC, so a long time ago, in what's current day Oaxaca in southern Mexico. And it's atop of a mountain. And when this was originally conceived of and built, this place, it was an experiment in democracy. And this experiment in democracy happened like centuries before more contemporary examples of that, right? We think of the Iroquois Confederation in North America as the sort of several different Native American tribes coming together and creating a confederacy. In fact, the United States democracy was based on the Iroquois Confederacy. Well, thousands of years before that, in Oaxaca, Mexico, in Monte Alban, there was an experiment in democracy. And like Washington, D.C., they actually built the convening center of their culture and civilization as a map of their intentions. So they created, it was a convening of 8 different states, if you will, that came together in a confederacy, and each had their own specialty and degree of wealth and unique ingredient that they brought to the stew, let's say, right? And they came together in their convening governing center, and they each had a palace, and each palace was on equal footing. So the wealthiest state had the same presence at the convening as the poorest state, yet they all had their palaces. And at one end was the leader, the position of the leader of this confederation, because there needs to be a little bit of leadership. It doesn't have to be top down, but someone or something who brought these folks together. And the most interesting requirement of this leader was that that person could hear all 8 dialects of these states. So here's the defining characteristic, is that they didn't have to change what they did to be part of this. The leadership changed what they did to embrace everyone and make them part.
Beautiful.
So at one end you had a pyramid with the leadership. At the other end you had multiple pyramids with the elders, right? The generations that came before, because you can only look forward if you understand your history. Those things have to be in balance. And then the 8 palaces stood on either side of a collective plaza in the center. And so what I love about that story is that literally is a map of their intentionality. And I love that you had to hear each dialect. And they could come with their particular ingredient in the whole. So that's one example. Have you ever been there?
Democracy. True democracy.
It's a democracy.
Yeah.
Have you ever been there?
No.
I have to take you someday.
I want to go.
So another map of intentionality in a built place is a place that I know you do know, which is Teotihuacan, Mexico, right? So these are the pyramids north of Mexico City. And what I love about this complex is this was actually, although it's been inhabited by many, many cultures, after its founding inhabitants created this place. I'm going to talk about the founding dream, not about the later dreams that came along, because later dreams included Mayans and Aztecs and, you know, lots and lots of cultures inhabited this place. But the original founding of this place was to create a place where people realized their own intentions, their own creative mastery. And they did this in a particular way. So there's a long avenue that's called the Avenue of the Dead. And you know, there are a series of plazas along the Avenue of the Dead. And each of those relates to energy centers in the body, right? The chakras. So you have the root chakra, which is earth there. And then you have creative second chakra, creativity, which is water. And then you go up through all the chakras until you get to the place where the 2 largest pyramids are. And on the right is the largest pyramid, and this is as big as the pyramid in Egypt, right? The second largest pyramid in the earth, on the earth. And that's the pyramid of the sun, and that's intentionality. But it's so interesting because that's not at the end of the axis, right? That's on the way of the axis. What's at the end of the axis? You know this.
The moon.
The pyramid of the moon. What's the moon about? Expression and form. So on one side you have intentionality, and the other side you have form. And the reason the pyramid of the sun is not at the end is because to make form, you have to have an intention. You have to have a purpose, right? So the pyramid of the sun is the tallest one. You go to gain intention there and clarity about what you want to do, and then you make it. You make it happen on this earth, and that's the pyramid of the moon. And that's the destination.
Yes.
And the creation story of this place is that this place was designed by 2 twin brothers, right? Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl was the intention building person, a deity, and Tezcatlipoca is the form making personality in the twin. You have to have both. You have to start with intentions, and then you move the intentions into form. And then when things move into form, guess what? You get to look at them and say, hey, did this accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? How can I refine it? How can I make it better? So there are places and there are cultures who knew about this, who knew about intentions had to precede form. If you make a bunch of form with no intentions, what do you get? Gobbledygook. Mess.
Mud.
Mud. So this is totally a time for us to clarify our intentions. And as we go into making a new world or making adjustments here, we have an opportunity to step back. We're being forced to slow down and step back and see what we've created, and let's evaluate what we've created. And then let's see how we can move forward and clarify our intentions and maybe make our choices, build the built environments that we want, create the companies that we want, create our effort to be in service, to be useful from a new place of intentionality.
Beautiful.
Right? So that's how environments are made, even our homes, right? Even our offices, even the most simple day-to-day spaces. That same level of intentionality and usefulness and purposefulness and connection to our purpose as the occupants can be infused in the places that we occupy, in the places that we make. And what if even better, there's a way to do that, and say we worked in a group and we brought the community into the decision making about that. So for example, we we'll work with a neighborhood or we'll work with a community. And what if we give the community the tools to actually help them evaluate their own neighborhood, their own city, their own built environment, and give them voice? And then what can come out of that is a level of engagement and then empowerment and responsibility for that place, right? So if we do it all up here and give it to everybody, you know what happens. You have kids. You give them everything, what happens? They don't appreciate anything, right? They work for stuff. Yeah, they work for stuff. They understand the value of it. Yes. They take responsibility for it.
Yes.
Then they know more. They're empowered then, right? So not only can we create places with intention, and that tension can amplify our creative potential as the inhabitants of those places, but what if we can increase the sense of power and responsibility of others in those places?
Yeah.
Amplify what they do.
Yes.
And how useful they are in the world.
Well, that's where, that sense of equality of value comes in, that if people if they were responsible and took those actions, they would get their own value. But if they're not given something and instead people try to overpower and control, they never see their value, which is, a big reason why even that does happen purposefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what this gets me thinking about leadership and leadership models? Mm-hmm. And there's another old story from ancient Americas, the cultures of the ancient Americas. And there's a model that we're pretty familiar with in our training, and that is of the Nawal, right? The Nawal is a leader of a group, and that leadership has been defined over different generations in different ways. But what I love about the leadership model of the Nawal is that the Nawal is a leader, but a leader teacher. And I love this idea of leader teacher. Like, if you say leader, it means teacher. If you say teacher, it means leader. Like, the two are really linked. Mm-hmm. And implicit in that understanding of Nawal is the fact that leaders aren't there to be apart from, or to have power over, but leaders are there to imbue or build up the power in others. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty understood in the locations, the two, Monte Albano and Teotihuacan, that I mentioned to you. Like, that understanding of leadership at the times, the eras that I'm referring to when these were built, that was kind of an understanding that teaching and leading were woven together. And the reason that makes me think about that is because this whole idea of empowering people with tools to help them do what they do better, that's what you do, right? You empower people through taking care of their body, being responsible for their body and what they put into it, and therefore benefiting from all the energy and wellness that comes from that. Mm-hmm. In our architectural practice, we do that as well. We give people the tools. We don't just give them a design, but we're teaching them along the way about how to interact with their built environment, how to use their built environment to manifest their intentions. Beautiful. How to start with intentionality and how to move it into form. In the same way that the pyramid of the sun feeds what's in the pyramid of the moon. And intentionality feeds form.
That does, Feng Shui is an art in which that happens, yes? Is that part of that?
It's another toolkit, right? Uh-huh. So Feng Shui is super interesting, and we use a lot of Feng Shui principles kind of homogenized with other principles. We call it in our practice biophilia, in fact.
Biophilia?
Biophilia, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But Feng Shui recognizes that there's inherent properties in materials, in things. So in wood, there are inherent characteristics and properties, and in stone, there's inherent characteristics and properties, and in water, and in orientation, according to kind of where you are in the earth and how you relate to the sun rising and the sun setting. So all of those things bring characteristics to it. So when one uses Feng Shui, you kind of know these rules about and these properties, And so depending on somebody's intention, you can set them up to balance inequities of a particular location. There's too much of this kind of energy. You can cut it by adding that material.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite example that everyone will probably understand is there's lots and lots of wood. Everybody loves this combination. You've probably seen it, of wood and white. Have you just seen beautiful images of wood and white next to each other?
Yes.
Why is that so satisfying? That's really satisfying because wood is about growth. It has all the natural elements of a tree and its growth. And white is a metal. White is metal energy. So if there's too much wood, we get waterlogged and heavy, like in the way that when our livers are not healthy, we feel waterlogged and heavy, right? And the energy of liver is wood. And then there's metal that cuts wood, right? So you can balance the properties of wood with white, with metal energy. It can also be balanced with red, with fire, right? But if you balance the properties, then everything just kind of feels in place. Yes. So that's kind of an idea of Feng Shui, but that's also a principle of biophilia. So biophilia is a relatively recent term, and it is built on the principle that native in our bodies, like deeply rooted in our preconscious body functioning, we have certain relationships to nature, and those relationships in nature actually impact our bodies. So if you've heard about, if you're feeling stressed, get out into the woods, right? Go take a walk, kind of ground yourself in nature, because we as human beings feel more comfortable when we're balanced in nature. If we're too disconnected from our natural material context, then we don't cope as well with sort of our culture-made stresses, right? So part of biophilia is understanding that natural principle that we are balanced animals, our bodies are balanced when we're in balance and in harmony with nature, because that's where our roots are. And so biophilia is understanding that and bringing connection to nature or natural materials into the built environment with a particular purpose, to soothe, to calm, to increase acuity or awareness, right? If we have more fresh air, there's data now that shows we can actually comprehend at 4 and 5 times the rate that we can if the air is stagnant and a little bit too warm, right? And if we have visual connections to outside where we can just look at the treetops and take a breath, then our heart rates will go down, our stress levels will go down. And if we create places of prospect over the landscape, that's a biophilic principle that's rooted in our nature too. So think about, why does everybody want a deck off of the back of their house, right? People love sitting on terraces or decks, right? You're just a little bit elevated from the landscape, but you can have prospect out over the landscape. Well, that goes way, way back to feelings of safety, right? We would position ourselves when we're in the savannah or in other locations slightly elevated so we could see around. And when we could see around and know that we were safe, then we could relax.
Interesting.
So those ideas of having prospect over our landscape or having natural materials around us naturally balances our biology and then helps us do what we do better.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so we love to think about that and use that in the places that we make, right?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, it's funny because I move from room to room. It definitely elicits different feelings in me, and I love creating home. I love creating my environment, and I've moved quite a bit, so I've had a lot of practice at it. But going outside, boy, just being in the air and on the earth is the best. No matter how beautiful I can make the inside, I love just being out there in nature.
So when you create your space, what are you connecting to? Like, how are you making decisions about what to put where, or how something feels, or when you try it out, do you try it out and say, oh, that doesn't feel quite right, and then you rearrange it? Like, how do you land on a satisfaction point when you're creating your own space?
What's really interesting is because I've moved so much and I have what I have, I know how I like it to be together. And it does change from space to space, but color is obviously, I love color. So color is a big one. Color affects me quite a bit. And I tend to bring a lot of color in. I'm not a white wall person. And though the other thing is that I've noticed if there's a lot of busyness around me, that it almost just, it's like busy beauty, but it's beautiful busy, but it somehow keeps me more elevated than if I were to just have solid white walls and nothing else. Yeah, I just noticed that recently. It's like, wow, there's a lot of different things and things happening.
Do you think that's because you kind of have emotional connections to all the things around you? Or do you think it's because it takes something that feels empty and makes it feel full? Like what's this? Is it creating a fullness in you, or is it creating a connection to memories, or what is it, do you think?
Well, I look at these things and they're all beautiful and they make me feel just, I so appreciate art. I so appreciate the many forms of expression of all of these artists that have created everything that's around me. And it makes me feel good. I just appreciate it, and it elevates me, yeah. So it might be busy, but I look at them separately. I don't look at everything all at once. So it's, where I put crystals and, I pick one up and it's like, that there are many opportunities and options. I love my options. Variety.
So when you're evaluating if your space is working for you, paying attention to all those things that remind you of beauty is an important takeaway for you.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, for example, I can't stand clutter. Like if I've got, you've been to my house, So if my countertops are like empty in my kitchen, but I love beautiful things too, but they're all on the wall. So even within that kind of commonality, taking into account people's individual style is super important, right?
Yeah.
Totally. There's not one answer that fits everybody.
And I just had a Fung Shui reading done, and one of the qualities, the element she said I am, is water. And when I think of water, I mean, it's just, it's flowing, it's ever changing, it's creative, it's, just so many things, just the feeling of water, what it does. I love being in water. So I don't know if art does the same thing for me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I think some things just make you happy, and so that's why you include them in your built environment, right?
Yes. And I love light. I love having light,
Most people, that's one of the largest comments, most people prefer a lot of daylight, a lot of natural daylight in their space, or at least the ability to have that. And I think that's part of the connection of light and air. And actually, considering light and air in a space as well as materials is one of those really important things. Like we find, because we do work in schools, and I think I mentioned this before, the amount of daylight and the amount of fresh air in schools has tremendous impact on cognitive abilities. Right?
Totally.
Yeah. So even if it's just cracking open a window or getting outside to take a breath of fresh air, when we get a little sluggish at our desks, standing up and doing that, moving our blood a bit, but also getting a breath of fresh air actually makes our mind, our brain more capable of focused function.
Right.
So that's something to pay attention to. If you feel like there's a place where there's too much, then somebody might come and say, well, maybe I need more air in here.
Yes.
And air is just space at that point too. So, something to think about. But what I love about this is the work that we do is like our job is to meet everybody where they are. Like lots of times people think of architects as coming with a pre-designed vision, like, oh, here's the beautiful vision I'm going to give to you. And there's a place perhaps for that. But I find it much more interesting to say, what is your dream? Like, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? How do you need to be supported? And then work together to collaborate on a design outcome. So if you look at the work on our website, it's pretty diverse. It's all over the place. Where it comes together is the focus on materiality and beauty. And I think there's a calm sense that runs through all of our work, even retail work or other things that have a lot of energy in them. And the projects are different because, first of all, I want to bring in collaboration with the wisdom that you know so much more about your space than I could ever know and what satisfies you. So why would I come in and tell you? What I can do is actually draw out of you what it is that you want, disconnect it from those solutions, identify a bunch of intentions, and then come back forward to a solution that we create together. And if you know about that process, how would that affect you if you were in your space? If you knew why all the decisions were made and why there's a skylight there, or why there's a big window here, or why that wall is dark, or why this floor is what it is.
It feels like it would really clean it up, like it really would just get right to it and be clear, direct, and simpler.
Yeah. That's what I hope, at least. Plus, it's fun to work with all these people in this way, right?
Yeah.
And every time we're making a decision, I get to play that now wall role, right? I get to be the leader, I get to be the teacher. And I can say, hey, were you aware that this does this and this? And most people say, wow, that really makes a lot of sense. So I'm giving them tools, right?
I love it.
My whole team is giving them tools.
So is that what if we could, we're kind of coming towards our end, and if you could describe what that tool kit that you're offering here to everyone is, that would be great.
Sure. So we thought, right now we're in the midst of a lot of change, right? As we started off our conversation today, there's a lot of people feeling displaced and in the unknown, and fearful for their health, but knowing that there's a chance that we can sort of level up what we do in the middle of this. So as part of that conversation, we're focusing a particular group of our skills for what we're calling a workspace reboot. So if this is a reboot, if this is a chance for reboot, like at the biggest scale, and like you said, everything starts from the inside out, we thought it'd be great to offer a workspace reboot. So whether your workspace is newly at your home, when you're used to being outside of your home, whether it's in a co-working space, albeit changed, whether it's in a traditional office or workspace, everyone has a place where they do some kind of work. And so what we're offering is a workspace reboot. We'll have a little survey that we send to you. And you can fill out the survey and send us a few photos, and it's super easy. You just take photos with your smartphone and upload the photos, upload the form. We'll take a look at it, and we'll look at things like we've been talking about today. We'll look at light and air. We'll look at materials. We'll look at organization. We'll look at your body wellness in the space, right? Like, are you properly supported when you're sitting and working, or would you be better to be standing and working? Or how can we create diversity of positions to keep your body wellness improved, or create improvement around your body wellness? We'll look at design and character, kind of the things that we've been talking about. And we'll also look at equal friendliness. This is something we haven't talked about a lot today, but another piece of the puzzle that we bring to all of our work is a real consciousness of sustainability and balance. Like, do the materials have harmful chemicals in them that you have in your space? Could you improve the well-being of your space just by removing something that might be creating, chemicals in your space that you're not aware about? If you go and paint, we can recommend paints and finishes that don't have any off-gassing chemicals in them. So friendliness for your body, but also friendliness for the planet, is something that's totally in our consciousness with every decision. So we'll look at it from those 6 points of view. And then once we take all that information and we do some analysis, we'll have a Zoom conference with everybody who, just like this, and go through our recommendations, and we'll have a toolkit of recommendations that each person can implement themselves. Because lots of people think, oh, I can't afford an architect. Like an architect, I'm not building a bunch of stuff. I'm not starting a new house. I'm just talking about my workspace. But in fact, there's toolkits that everybody can use and employ themselves without a contractor, with just a little bit of guidance, a little bit of leading teaching from an architect or an architect's design team about how to kind of make our workplaces better. So if we do a workspace reboot and we get ourselves all aligned, then we can be of more service in the world, right? We can rise to the challenge that we have now and be more productive, or be more focused, or make those choices a little bit more consciously. As we talked about, our built environment can support us in doing all of those things. So why not have a little reboot? So
Wow.
that's what we're offering. Does that sound good to you?
So fabulous. I want to do it.
You know where to call.
I do. I'm so inspired. Each person that I've interviewed, it's like, oh, I want to go do that. It sounds so awesome in terms of supporting us really in such a holistic way. So, wow. Thank you. I love this. I'm just going to check really quick and see if there are any questions that anyone has out there. If you are on the call right now. Otherwise, we're going to come to a close here. And wow, I know that this conversation could just go on, and it's so inspiring. So just beautiful. Thank you for this incredible time here. Let me just check really quick here. Okay, well, there are no questions yet, and that's fine. If you have anything that comes up, first of all, we are going to be posting this video with Laura's offer and with our offer as well from Beyond Broth, and information how you can contact her. And if you want to get this incredible offer to reboot your space, wow, what an opportunity. This is such a gift. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom, your heart. What your mission is just stunning and so appreciated. So
my pleasure, and thank you for creating this forum. I really love what you're doing here, and I love the diversity of people that you're bringing together to share different points of view about how all of us can actually take advantage of this moment to choose in our integrity, to choose in our wholeness, and to create this new world, maybe just in a slightly different way.
Yes.
Or maybe in a big different way.
However it is.
However it is.
Yes. All right. Well, I wish everyone a blessed, beautiful spring weekend, and carry on until next time. We will, we're changing forms a little bit, so we may not have it live next week, but it will be showing up soon, but we'll keep in touch and let you know. Thanks again, everyone, for being here, and much love